Hello. Well, hello. This is Sonia from An Enthusiastic Reader. It's been a while since I last did a check-in video, and I've read quite a few books since that time. I think it was at the end of May is the last time I checked in on my channel. So I wanted to say hello and catch you up on the things that I've been reading and the things I'm reading now, and just chat a little bit. So thanks for being here. I also finished the Balthazar, which is the second in the Lawrence Durrell Alexandria Quartet. And these books kind of defy explanation because you really have to read all of them to get the full experience of the way they come together, all the stories. But suffice it to say, it's right before World War II in Alexandria, Egypt, and all these different people, some from Egypt and some like people from Europe and different countries, all come together into this like hotbed of jealousy, sexual tension, heat, clash of religions, clash of cultures, and then like all of these sexual affairs. And it's so good. The writing is so good, and it's just so mysterious. And the first two novels are all based on someone who is Irish, an Irish novelist teacher who kind of insinuates himself into this group and thinks that he's having this deep love affair with this woman named Justine, who is married to someone else. And then in the second book, which I finished next, all of that gets upended, and he gets a rude awakening about actually what was happening that he didn't know about. And it's just so well told. I just started the third in the series called Mountolive, which is written in the perspective of a completely different character. And again, I'm just so interested to see the way that each narrative of these stories comes together to tell this one story. So it's great. Really enjoying that. I'm reading that with Teresa, and we've really enjoyed having a good back and forth together about this. I read a book about reading. It's a nonfiction book. It's kind of essays. They all come together, so it's not selected essays or just a collection of essays. It's written with a particular purpose in mind, in a particular order, to talk about reading, talk about it in a lot of different ways. And the first part of this book, it's called Books Promiscuously Read, Reading as a Way of Life by Heather Cass White. And she starts off with like a series of declarations at the beginning, and they're very short, but talking about how reading is not morally better than any other endeavor. There is nothing inherently special about reading in terms of you are a better person if you read. And it talks about the pleasures of reading, just all of her beliefs about reading. And then the next part of this collection starts really saying, okay, we've made all these declarations, but if you like to read and if reading is very important to you, here's some ways to consider it. And then it talks about reading as like a transgressive process, reading as rebellion, reading as forbidden. And she uses all kinds of different references from literature, like Frankenstein's monster, the poetry of Elizabeth Bishop, Dorothea Brooke from Middlemarch. And she uses all of these different examples from literature to back up and talk about her, all of her thoughts about reading and why the pleasures of reading, and how being in the middle of a story cannot be replicated in any other way. And that is why some people are so prone to rereading, is that they want to feel that all over again, the feeling of being immersed in a narrative. And even when you put the book down at night, you're not in it anymore. The only way you can be in that narrative is to be actively reading, or I would say, or listening, or whatever it is, interacting in some way with this story or narrative. And I wasn't sure about the book at the beginning, but I really ended up liking it, and really made me think more about the reading process. And I just remember some people in my life being so irritated that we, as people in our family, were always reading. And, just the comments of like, their head's always in a book. And yeah, it was always in a book for a lot of different reasons. And clearly it appealed to us and it made us who we are. Not better people, but it did change the way you think, or it changed the way I think. So um, if you like the contemplative aspect of the act of reading, I would suggest this book. For one of my book clubs, we read The Painted Veil by Somerset Maugham, and I loved it for the most part. There were a lot of kind of extremely problematic ways that the narrative, and you're not sure in this sense if it's the narrator who's saying these things, if it's society saying these things, or if it's Maugham himself saying these things. But it takes place in China and I think Hong Kong. Okay, I don't remember because it's been several weeks, but it takes place in China and with Chinese people. And the way that the narrative treats the Chinese people is not nice. They are called monsters. They're just not depicted with any reverence or respect. They are just there as like foils for the white characters. So I'm going to say that off the top of my head, that I'm acknowledging that. But on the other hand, it was also a really good story about a woman who is not a very good woman. She's not very nice, and she's expected to marry well. And when she just keeps turning people down, and then her sister gets engaged, she suddenly gets a little bit panicked, and she marries the first person who asks her after her sister gets married or is just about to get married. And it turns out to be not a good match for her. She does not respect nor like her husband much at all. And so they move to a British colony in China somewhere, and she immediately she gets an infatuation and then a sexual affair with someone who's part of that British expat community there. And she thinks that, he loves her, and she decides that she's going to leave her husband and run off with this man. And so she tells her husband, this is what's happening. And he has loved her deeply, apparently. And then as soon as she says this to him, he's like, I will give you a divorce, but only if you get married within a very short period of time to this other man. So she has to go tell her lover about the situation. And the lover's like, hey, I never said we were going to get married, and I'm deeply in love with my wife, and we have a good thing going, and this is just a side, and that's not happening. And so she and her husband go to this kind of impoverished area where there's a cholera outbreak, and he is like a microbiologist, epidemiologist researcher trying to figure out how to cure cholera. And then her life changes as she's exposed to this other life. She's stripped away of her society, and her husband can't stand her and he won't talk to her. And so she has to kind of make her way in this environment where she is, not from and doesn't really understand the language. And she ends up kind of volunteering at this orphanage where their nuns are in charge of these children. And, she just kind of finds herself. And I love the book overall. Again, it was written in the 1920s. And so, that's probably how they all saw people who weren't white, and it's deeply embedded into the story. And I didn't like that part, but I tried to just see past it into what was happening with the main character. So all in all, I really did enjoy my reading experience of that book. I also read Anything is Possible by Elizabeth Strout. This was kind of a companion novel to a novel that I deeply loved called My Name is Lucy Barton. So I reread My Name is Lucy Barton again. I think it was my third time reading that book. Still love it very much. And then because I heard that Lucy Barton is a character in Anything is Possible, I read it. But, she was part of one of the stories, but it was really much more about these tertiary characters in Iowa that if you read Olive Kittredge and you read her novels of tertiary characters in Maine, they were like a different completely different kinds of characters in Olive Kittredge than in Anything is Possible. The people in the Midwest, in Elizabeth Strout's mind, were different. They were much harsher to each other, and the families were very embittered toward each other. They didn't share their struggles as much. They were very jealous of each other and kind of very petty people. And so it was a completely different reading experience for me reading this. And Lucy Barton does show up to visit her brother, who is really not doing well. And I read all of this in preparation because I have an advanced review copy of a book called Oh, William, which is about Lucy Barton and her first husband, William. And so I really wanted to be in this universe. It wasn't a completely successful reading experience for me this time, but I'm still glad I read it, and I'm looking forward to getting into that next chapter of the Lucy Barton universe. And finally, I finished yesterday morning Emma by Jane Austen for Jane Austen July. My experience with Emma in the past is that I read it in high school. I think I read it in the 11th grade. And the minor mini trauma that I have in remembrance of this is that I was in a pretty hard English class that I'm not sure that I was completely ready for. And we were supposed to give these individual talks about novels we were reading. And my book was Emma. And I had it in my mind that it was going to be on a certain date. And the day before that date, we're sitting in the classroom and I get called on to do the talk. And I was completely flabbergasted by this. I was not ready, but I knew that there was like no excuses. I had to get up and talk about the book, which I did, and I did okay. I don't remember what grade it was or anything, but I mean, my adrenaline was probably through the roof. And I used to blush when I was in high school. Like any little thing would set me off and I would just turn bright red, and it didn't take much. And I was always blushing and So that's what I remember about Emma. I haven't read it since. I read it over the last few days. For the most part, I enjoyed it. It's not my favorite Austen for sure. I think the plot is not quite as strong as some of her other novels. I didn't understand the central conflict. Like I didn't understand the rationale for it, which I won't give it away. But if you've read it recently, you probably know what I'm talking about. But I didn't think that it was worth, it just didn't get it. And then also Emma has a sister. She lives very close by, and she just pushed off to the side. She's not a part of the story. She hardly ever gets brought up, yet her husband's always coming around. And so I felt like it was weird to have a character who's the sister that isn't really a part of Emma's life or consideration or in her father's realm, other than to be a mother to grandchildren, and seeing what she was like, to compare the sisters to each other as you do in Pride and Prejudice. So, yeah, but overall, I enjoyed it, and I would like to watch the movie. I have had it taped for months and months on my TiVo, and so I do plan to read or to watch that to see how it compares to the book while it's still fresh in my mind. So that's what I've been reading. I'm still reading The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. I'm reading that with Sean from Past Story Time, and we're reading 20 to 25 pages a day-ish, and I think we're both really enjoying it. It's funny. It's a lot different than I thought it would be. I guess I didn't know what to expect, but we've got this 23-year-old, I would say kid, but I know that he's an adult, but he's a very young adult and he's not very mature, it doesn't seem like. And he goes to visit his cousin who has tuberculosis in a sanatorium in Davos, Switzerland. And he's supposed to stay 3 weeks to visit. And it turns out he also has tuberculosis. And so he's acclimating himself to living in this hospital for God knows how long. We're about a third done with the book. And I don't know what's coming for old Hans, but it's so funny. He's playing these mental games with having crushes on people and but not telling them, and just working things out in his mind and understanding different people. And he classifies the Russians who were in the hospital as good Russians and bad Russians. And there's like a good Russian table and a bad Russian table, and they eat a lot. They eat 5 times a day, and they lay around a lot, and they go for little walks, and that's all they do. And I was reading this in preparation for the new Colum Tobin novel that is coming out this summer, and I have an advanced review copy of it, but I have never read any Thomas Mann, and it's about him and it's about his life, this novel. So I wanted to at least get a taste of what his books are like before I read a book about his life. And so that was my motivation. And then Sean said she wanted to do it too. So I think it's much better reading this one together with someone, because we can kind of laugh about some of the things and just talk about some of the concepts that are popping up, and it's been great. And so I'm reading that. I'm reading All Aunt Hagar's Children with Marion Ryan, and we're just like really taking our time, like not being strict at all about a time schedule. And so I think we're just about ready to start the 4th or 5th story, and that's really interesting. And I owe her a Voxer. And so, Marion, if you're seeing this, I'm coming. I'm catching up with my life. So, is that all? I think for right now, that's all I want to talk about in terms of books. I did go to Chicago last weekend, and I have a nice book haul. So I think I might make a video about the books that I hauled while I was in Chicago, and I'll talk more about that. But it was really fun to see our daughter, who we hadn't seen in over a year, and my sister lives out there, so we got to see. We all hung out together all the time, and we had a lot of fun. We ate some good food. We went to the Science and Industry Museum and saw like this U-boat that's been on display there forever. And that was really interesting, because my husband and I have been watching Band of Brothers for the first time. Yeah, we're like 20 years late, but we just finished watching that series. And so we kind of had World War II on the brain from that series. But I highly recommend that series, by the way. It was, I didn't expect to like it at all, and I really liked it. Yeah, that's all I've got for you for now. But I'm glad to talk to you. I have been watching some BookTube. I haven't been commenting very much, so please don't think I've just abandoned everybody. But I just have been enjoying taking a little break from worrying about making videos and just reading and watching some movies. And I've also been working on some projects for clients, and so that's all I have to talk about for now. And hug your family and have some fun, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.